New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
And hello again, dear ones. Reverend Robert behind the banner here.
And Rev Z right over here on the other side of that banner.
Exactly. And this is New Thought Today. Happens every Tuesday here on the Mountain Time Zone. If you're with us today and you're here because you saw an advertisement for Reverend Dr. David Alexander to be our special guest, no worries. That's going to happen next week. We do apologize. Last minute things that happen in the world of ministerial colleagues. We understand that, and we know that there's nothing wrong in the universe, and all is well in Reverend Dr. David's world. And he had things that were a little bit more pressing than this program, but he's going to be with us next Tuesday. And the Tuesday after that, we're going to have Reverend Mark Gilbert with us as well. So we've got a couple of great guests lined up for you over the next couple of weeks. In the time we have today, however, what came to mind, Z, was that old concept of necessity is the mother of invention.
Yes.
And as soon as I recognized that Dr. David wasn't going to be with us, my first thought was, okay, what are we going to do? What are we going to talk about for an hour? And I was not happy with what I found. Folks, if you haven't heard yet, there's been another school shooting in the United States. And Z and I have actually tracked the fact there has been a recent uptick in teenagers and guns in our schools. And our kids are dying because of it. And we want to take a look at today at what's going on, what's the situation, what's a new thought way to look at how we might support a change in perception or a change in activity and a change in what's going on in our high schools, and even our middle schools at this point are not immune. So these things are happening in our middle schools as well. Z, you want to break? Do you want to give folks a little bit of an insight on what happened today?
Yeah, well, in Michigan, we've had another shooting at a high school. We had 3 people killed, and they're still trying to, and 3 killed, 6 wounded. And this was by a 15-year-old student. They had a shooting here in Colorado at Hinckley High School just about 10 days earlier, where 3 students were shot, no deaths. And then there was another one at Central High School, 6 kids were shot in that thing. And all of these shootings are like kids, 15, 16 years old. And it's sad. Because now I know for the 2 schools in Colorado, they've closed campus. You can't go off for lunch if you don't, you can't come in. I mean, they got it on lockdown. And to think about in 1 month, and we haven't even talked about the other ones. And they got stuff in Texas and Louisiana and Mississippi, and that's just for the month of October, right? It's hard to believe that teenagers, barely teenagers, they're 15 and 16, have that many issues that they need to kill somebody.
Yeah.
Or display that kind of rage. It's a sad commentary, and I think we have to begin to look at unraveling why this is happening and what kind of solutions, programs, prayers, and everything else that we can begin to implement to give these kids a chance to live and take some of the stress and drama out of high school.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy that I was brought up. We didn't even have a cop on it. There wasn't even a cop in town Right, and it wasn't a huge high school, not like today's schools, with the number of kids and it would appear to be just way too easy to get weapons. Whether it's automatic weapons, whether it's high capacity magazines. Now, this young man today, the report I saw was that this was predominantly a handgun issue, and there are some. There's always those glimmers of good news as well, because even in the midst of this today, I want to bring everybody's attention to the fact that a federal appeals court today did hand down a decision that stands behind California's ban on high capacity magazines and upheld the state's decision to ban high capacity magazines. That's a big move for a federal appeals court to do. And I think it's a great move not necessary. And the main argument was that people needed these magazines for self-defense, to protect their home, to protect their property. And what the court ruled was there is no evidence whatsoever that anybody has ever not been able to protect themselves or their property because they didn't have these magazines. That's a step in the right direction. And many believe this is a signal that the court will also uphold California's ban on assault weapons entirely. Again, another good move in starting to limit some of what we have. But I think we got to get some buyback programs going on. We got to find ways to get the guns that are out there out of these kids' hands.
Yeah. And these high capacity weapons, magazines, these kids aren't in the military. They're not even in the junior ROTC. Come on. It's like we've created this society or this culture or subculture. I don't even know what to call it anymore, where this being tough and having guns and showing that whole thing off has just gotten way too proliferated. And some people say, well, it's the video games with all the guns, and then some people will say, well, it's the social media and the bullying, and everybody's trying to get their 5 minutes of fame. There are many different contributing factors, but at the heart of it, I think we have to get rid of the guns.
At some point, somebody puts a piece of metal in their hand. It doesn't matter what got you to that point. If we can keep that from that moment from happening, from the bullets getting in the magazine to the getting in the hand. And you all know I'm not a gun aficionado by any means, so I got no idea how much these things cost. But I'm pretty sure it ain't that cheap. No. So we've got teens in many times arguably less affluent, more marginalized neighborhoods and parts of our cities that somehow end up with high capacity magazines, with automatic weapons, with handguns, all these things. Where's all that money coming from? How can we get in that line and say, okay, wait a minute, before that money gets spent on a gun, let's get that money into some other social services or some other help, so we don't get to the point where the gun is the answer.
Because I just did a quick check on an AR-15. That's
okay.
And I'm sure there's some plus and minus on the cost, but that thing came up at $950.
$1,000
just for the gun, right? And you still got to get you some ammo. So you figure to get equipped, if you will, or outfitted, you're talking $1,100-$1,200.
And if you're 15, then you ain't buying that legally. So you're buying it on the black market, which means it ain't just $1,000 or $1,500.
Yeah, you're paying a premium for not having to go through background checks and stuff.
Yeah,
potentially. Exactly. Hot money.
So, and folks, this is a spiritual network. We're not going to pretend that we're not doing our prayer work to alleviate that sense of separation and that sense of suffering and that sense of division that must live in the hearts of these kids, because you have to be I have to believe you're pretty scared and you're feeling pretty separated from source if you're picking up a gun to try to solve your problems. And again, we have the beauty of hindsight. We know 40 years down the line that 15 really sucked, but it got better. It got better because I didn't shoot anybody. I didn't have access as easily to be able to create something like that in our lives. So these kids are doing that, feeling this. We're doing our prayer work for it. But you also know this show is all about looking at, let's do the prayer work and then take the inspired action. And we might not find any answers today, Z, but I got a feeling that the exploration is worth the journey.
Yes, no doubt. And I think, one thing we do know, because it's all over the media in terms of social media and some of the stuff that they're looking at on Meta or the old Facebooks or however we want to term it, we know that this whole concept of bullying, and shaming and all of that stuff is taking place on that platform.
On a lot of platforms.
And a lot of platforms, yeah. But and so, how do we and now the cat's out the bag, right? Social media and all these sites are not going away. They're here to stay. And they do have a good purpose, and people are using them for business and to stay in touch with family and so forth. But, one, how do we begin to have these platforms create a bully-free zone, if you will? And how do we begin to educate everybody on the proper use of these tools and how to basically go back to some basic respect on human life? And it's not as easy as just, I'm mad at you because you stepped on my shoe or because you're from the other side of town or whatever, then I'm going to pull a gun and shoot a bullet.
Yeah. Folks, if you're just joining us, we're taking a deep dive into the conversation around guns in our schools, specifically in the hands of middle schoolers and teenagers. Well, I guess, if you're a college kid and you got a gun, that's another show. We'll do that some other day. But and this is sparked by another shooting in another high school in Michigan that has left 3 young people dead, three high school students dead. Several others injured, including at least one teacher, we believe. And it happened at the end of a handgun in the hands of did we get to an age on this young 15. Man yet? 15. So if you'd like to join the conversation, please feel free. You're welcome to send it. No, I'm sorry. Bad use of words there. Bad pun. Bag. Did it again. There we go. ministertalk@ntmedia.org. Let us know what you think about all of this. What can we do as a society? How are we going to get these guns, this situation under control? Because if I believe anything, I believe that it is our young people, our human resource, the people on this planet are our greatest opportunity and our greatest resource, and we're just letting people be killed needlessly.
And kid, the person who is going to come up with the next cure for whatever may have just transitioned for God knows what at 15, right? And I think, I grew up in the South and guns were prevalent, but not a lot of handguns. There was shotguns and rifles because it was mainly around hunting. But there was some kind of training. There was some etiquette, on how to use your weapon, and you had to learn the weapon, to clean the weapon, and they may be doing that now. But I'm saying that to say there was some education / responsibility training of what this is. This can kill you or someone else. It's not a toy. those kinds of things. And now
Right.
they're being used as status symbols in a lot of cases.
There's a YouTube channel and a few that I'm aware of actually of men teaching young men the things that a father would, because we do have, between your generation and where we are today, right, Z, our generation where we are today, there's a lot more kids being brought up without fathers. And so this is another part of it, right? Gun education is not being taught in the home any longer. It would appear, at least in some of these instances. And one of the other stories that we just saw was a couple months back, 2 teenagers, 13 and 15, were arrested in Florida. They were prepared and ready and armed to have another major shooting. And we didn't hear about it because somebody else said something, and another student told an administrator, I think they might have guns in their backpacks, and they did, a lot of them. And I want to live in a culture where there's just where that's not only an acceptable, it's acceptable to say, hey, I don't agree with this, and I think that's wrong. How many kids are turning their back because somebody brought a gun to school? How many are willing to stand up and say that's not right, and be heard and say that guy's got a gun?
And back in the day, you would fight it out, right? If I will meet you after school, and we're gonna have a fair fight. Your boys aren't gonna jump in, my boys aren't gonna jump in.
Yeah.
And you guys you're gonna duke it out. All right. Well, now that was a little, that could be looked at as a little extreme. But no guns were involved. Somebody might pull a knife or something, even that's wrong. But it has escalated from a fist fight to now indiscriminately killing people who may not have anything to do or know anything about what your beef is with someone else. And we have to begin to, in addition to the education, we got to begin to show some love and support for these young people. I think often we talk about, these young kids, they're this, that, and the other. But we as an adult have to begin to get to some level of engagement and infusion in that environment that they're in to understand it. I mean, because there's so many avenues as to trigger points of why this isn't happening. It's easy to say social media, which I've said already, but there's home situations, there's bullying situations, there are all kinds of things that are creating emptiness in these kids. And I'm thinking at 15, boy, you got to be pretty empty to walk into a school with a handgun, right? Because that's close quarters. I'm in your face with a handgun.
Right. That's a lot more intimate than a rifle, an automatic weapon of any sort. Yes.
So what has happened to cause me to be empty to that degree that I could walk up to someone at 2 to 6 feet and kill them?
Yeah. And I'm sitting here thinking, church is not the answer, because more and more and more, and I'm not saying this is absolutely the worst thing in the world, but more and more families are not sharing their faith together on Sundays. It's not compulsory. Right? I'm not getting drugged down to church on Sunday mornings every day. It's very easy as adults okay, you can sleep in, and I'm going to go to church online, and we condone that behavior around here. But we do also encourage, have a healthy spiritual experience and a healthy spiritual relationship with your family as a whole, as a kid. And if it's, how many kids resented being drugged into church on Sundays, never to go back, or only to discover later. And this is that age group where it's easy for a kid to get lost. Yeah. Early mid-teens, so much going on. More outreach, more engagement, I think.
Yeah, because you bring up an excellent point in that when the family went to their place of worship on Sunday, or sometimes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday as well. Depends on, on what was going on. But
Yeah.
even if they went and they weren't attentive or they fought going, there were some foundational lessons that got repeated over and over and over again. So subconsciously they stuck in. And then there was those that were like ingrained because of the household about fairness and protecting others and caring for those less for, some of those moral, if you will, precepts that would come up when you got out of sync. Now you still may have pushed past it, but they did make you pause for a moment, and that's not happening now. I don't think as much.
And for the most part, those environments are very positive and affirming for younger kids and young teens. That it's important to know that somebody outside of your family recognizes what you're doing, says hello to you, and recognizes, hey, you got a haircut, or you're looking taller than the last time. All those community aspects go a long way to alleviating that sense of separation.
Yes.
To helping create that sense of bonding and that sense of oneness that some of us maybe take a little for granted sometimes.
Yeah.
That the younger generations, just because they're brought up in some of this stuff, don't always feel that connection.
And that is an excellent point, because nowadays a lot of kids and adults, for that matter, are connected like we are right now online,
Right.
which is
Yeah.
a pretty flat medium. It's very hard to sometimes express emotions or closeness or sincereness. Whereas when I grew up and when you grew up, probably, there were extended neighborhoods and kids were outside playing, and there was some adults with some watchful eyes, and if things got or the older kids were there to break up the fights and things like that. Now a person can create a virtual world and live only in that world and begin to make up their own rules of what's fair and what's not fair, what's accepted and not accepted. And if that happens at such a level that they now move out of their own little created world into another so-called real world and begin to behave in that manner, now we got a problem.
Right. Exactly. You bring up a great imagery for me, because I remember more times than I can count in high school, a teacher, vice principal, somebody stepping in between two kids, taking one by the shirt and throwing him across the hall. Mm-hmm. And everybody watching grabs him and holds on to him and then holds him back. And the teacher can step in the middle of something and it's done. There ain't nobody stepping in the middle anymore. There's no way, right? Nobody should be asked to step in the middle anymore because of the way it is. And I get that. And we're not, right? Teachers are taught to take cover just like everybody else. And you can't step in. Yeah. So we've got to, wow, maybe it's time to bring back the boxing rings in high schools or something. Yeah. Give these kids, sanction it. Like, okay, you got a beef, put it on the card. And yeah, we'll meet in the gym at 3:00 with a couple of teachers and some gloves and some tape you up and let you guys go at it for 10 minutes and see if anybody's still standing. I don't know.
Well, my cousin tried to talk me into boxing one time. And I did some little workouts, 3 minutes on a heavy bag, buddy. I'll tell you, I was throwing up. And that heavy bag didn't hit back. So I don't even know if we'll go for 10 minutes. 3 minutes might be the limit. Because it is work. And it gives people a chance to think about what they're doing, I would hope. I know it did for us. Yeah. It's like crazy.
I got into about 3 fights in high school, lost all 3 of them. Decided this ain't my path. Nah, I'm done with this. I don't need no more of this stuff. Where are those peaceful hippie nicks, kid? Yeah, I'll go hang out with them. So, hey, folks. Okay. I was going to break in, so if you got a point, go for it.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, and that's where we have to start. We got to start at these kids in middle school, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, before they get to 9th grade.
Yeah.
And begin to create some sensitivity sessions and some oneness sessions, i.e., beginning to show that although I may be a different gender, color, different, the issues that we are facing are the same or very similar. And as opposed to taking those things to highlight to create contention, let's find what that is and try to find some way to alleviate them with
Right.
the kids coming up with it, not a parent or somebody imposing it, because then that's part of the age where they're rebelling against all of that.
Yep. You know, and this is a very interesting concept as well, because my family was able to witness a middle school bully whose behavior was not interrupted, and that led to even more dangerous behavior that did result in actions and arrest and creating a record for this young man. And they kept pushing him down the line, pushing him down the line, pushing him down the line. And now, somewhere in the middle of high school, and the same things are cropping up and the same problems are still there. And in some ways, right, again, schools were the opportunity to catch this, to support these kids. And our schools have become a little way overtaxed. Our teachers have become overtaxed and rightfully scared in many cases. There's another opportunity where I think sometimes society, we got to step up a little more too here. And what can we do to instill more of this in the school systems, rather than allowing that outlier to keep going? Because that ripple in that kid, it influenced a lot of other kids. We can see that. And I've watched that over the last 4 or 5 years right here in my own neighborhood. So
that whole thing of it takes a village is not just a platitude or some nice, it really takes a village to raise a child, right? Because my child may not listen to me, but he will listen to you perhaps, or listen to the coach, or listen to the music teacher who's
right.
saying relatively the exact same thing, but they can get through for whatever reason. And I'm not mad at them, because the ultimate goal is to have the kid get beyond this pivotal point. Like, I look at these teen years very synonymous with the mother bird pushing the bird out of the nest. You know, we know all of them are not going to fly. The vast majority of them will, but we want to give them enough stuff so that when they get pushed, that they can fly, and that they will fly, and that they won't crash and burn. And that's now becoming harder and harder with all of the elements that they're competing against and all of the different things that are being put upon them. We don't even talk about the COVID, shut in for almost 2 years, how that's acerbated this whole session.
Yep, exactly. See, your kids are a bit older, college and just coming out of college. My kids are a bit younger, middle school, high school. And we've had this unique way to look at some of these things. And one of the things that I believe we both share is the concepts of love and logic. And in love and logic, one of the ideas is that it's okay to let your kids make mistakes when they're kids, because you can pay for them easier. It doesn't hurt as much. It doesn't have this long-term effect on their lives as much. That is a slippery slope in today's society, because it's almost too easy for a kid to make a mistake that's got so much but greater ramifications.
Yep.
And now, again, let's not draw a direct correlation to video games or any of the other inputs that kids have today. But there's no question that they have been served a much different perspective of life and what's real and what's not real, and so on and so forth. We don't suffer from the PTSD of knowing that our school could get shot up any given day, or that our school could be the next outbreak of a pandemic, of the Omicron now, right?
Yeah.
It's tougher to be a kid, no question. And I'm going to keep coming back. That means it's our job to find ways to support these kids.
Right. And you know, one thing that I you made me think about with the love and logic and everything. Because at the cornerstone of love and logic, it's also the cornerstone of our way of life, CSL, is that there's only choices, right? Or not only choices, but everybody has to make choices. And
Right.
and my kids, they went to a Montessori school, which has that love and logic kind of thing built in, where there are choices and consequences. You know, my kids would get contracts at the beginning of the week that says, okay, these are the subjects that you need to take. Boom, boom, boom. The rest of this time you can free up. You can take extra math, extra reading, but at the end of the week, you need to have these main areas checked off.
Right.
And so there was a choice of consequence thing there, or cause and effect that went into. So at a very young age, they begin to understand, if I do this, these are some possible outcomes. If I did this, these are some other possible outcomes. And they learn to make decisions, and they do that individually, in pairs, and in groups, right? Because that's how they have those curriculums set up.
Right.
So you begin to learn how to control yourself and make good choices, how to work with another in a dyad, and to collectively, because now you both understand individually how to make choices. Now you can do it in a pair, and then when you get into the group, you have the same thing. And of course, everybody's at different levels of understanding and application of that, but everybody understands that we can't just get together as a group and go wild out and think that there's no consequences.
Right. Exactly. Folks, if you're just joining us, this is New Thought Today. It happens Tuesdays at 2. I think I lost a light bulb or something. All of a sudden, my lighting system went down. So no, it's not your computer that just got dark. It's my studio. But thank you for being with us. If you're just catching in on the conversation, welcome, welcome, welcome. We've been talking about the issue of guns in the hands of teenagers. And specifically in our schools. And really, here we are, half hour in, Z, and we're identifying a lot of, not necessarily, I don't want to call them underlying issues. It's kind of easy to find the contributing factors. What we're looking for is that glimmer at the end of the tunnel, that glimmer that says, hey, follow this path. And there's a way through, because what we know is there is always a spiritual solution to every human problem. And that begins in prayer and consciousness, but must flow through our human actions and our interactions and our omni action as an aspect of this. Yes. I'm really being called to, like, let's go find some mentoring programs, right? Where are I did a quick search on nonprofits that are working in the gun segment. Now, okay, that might be a place that's working for you, right? Find your place to say, what small thing can I do? Mm-hmm. Right? You don't have to give 1,000 hours a year. You could probably give an hour a month if you look around and find a way to get into a mentoring program, to start working with some kids somewhere that need some more support, and help them to recognize that, hey, yeah, 15 sucks. Mm-hmm. It did for me. It does for pretty much everybody. Mm-hmm. But again, the answer is not at the end of a gun, and the answer is not in a magazine, in a bullet.
And you know, the other thing, I was just remembering one of the cases that I saw, and this just happened at the end of September. I think may have been in Mississippi. I forget the town, but there was a 7-year-old who got shot by someone at the elementary school that had a gun, and it accidentally went off. Now, if we're down to 7-year-olds, right, and we know it's happening, so it's happening at all levels: elementary, high school, junior high school, and college, because we've had several colleges and it's just it's unthinkable.
How does a 7-year-old even hold up a gun? I don't.
Luckily, it went off accidentally, so I'm thinking that it was in their backpack, and they tried to lift it up, and
and it went off.
And it went off.
Wow,
it's just crazy.
Yeah. And again, there's always a way. There's always a solution. I may not know what it is off the top of my head. I may not have everything that it takes, but I know that as a collective, as a society, yes, we have to, and we will. And I think we're kind of, this is interesting, Z. I want to bring a whole new concept into this conversation and give us a little pivot here today. Because what's ringing in my brain is the word neo-tribalism. Now, in our moniker for the show, we do spout about, integral theory and evolutionary thought and things like that is part of what we're about. And I'm always, over the last handful of years, everybody's got to have a tribe, right? Everybody's starting a tribe, be part of my tribe, who's your tribe, all this stuff. And it always struck me a little bit wrong, especially in light of integral theory or spiral dynamics, that felt like a very, very major regression in consciousness. And forgetting that, well, all right, so what is a healthy version? And it's bringing forth this idea of neo-tribalism, a new version, a new perspective on tribalism that serves humanity rather than just mass community. Now, I don't know that we're ever going to be able to dismantle the major cities like New York and LA and Denver now. Right? I think there will always be that mass cultural experience from this point forward, barring a complete natural disaster, Holocaust type of event, but we're not big on the dystopian stuff around here. So how do we start to look at, well, what are the attraction factors to create a neo-tribalistic society?
So, it just popped into my head. I go back to high school, and we had the art club kids, and we had the wood shop kids, and the mechanical kids. And so, what I hear you saying is, and it always came very apparent during homecoming when we had to make floats and things, that we needed some for our school to be represented rather. We needed people from we needed some metal shop guys to come in and do some welding and stuff, and we need some wood shop to do some building, and some art people to paint and decorate. And so we had these teams or tribes, if you will, but they respected and knew where each one came in. Well, yeah, I can help weld some stuff together and create a structure, but you wood guys got to put the finishing touches, and then the art people got to paint and decorate. And at the end, we got 3 or 4 different teams who've come together and won and made a float to be in the parade that everybody's proud of, and nobody, for the most part, took one group for granted. They may tease each other, right? But they didn't take it for granted, because they know, if I just got a wood structure here with nothing on it, we're not going to win the float contest.
Right. Yeah.
And forget about winning. We're not even going to have a float in the parade.
Yep. Because you just shot the only good welder in the school, dummy. Yeah. Yes. It's again. So we need these creative ideas to find the creative solutions to this, right? I haven't been in high school in a long time, and what, as you were saying that, my thought was, yep. And it didn't matter whether you were in wood shop, metal shop, band. Everybody was trying to figure out how to make a pipe and get high. Everybody was meeting out in the back afterwards, or at least the hippie kids were. So somehow that uniqueness, is that getting lost? Are those little clubs is that getting lost? Are we getting homogenized to, yeah, well, there's band, or there's foot, you're a jock, you're a geek, you're only one of, versus that sense of being united in something?
And when I look back at the Montessori training, Montessori training in large part was it's a natural and a historical approach to education. So they use that as the underpinning, and they and a traditional Montessori school is a working farm, right?
Right.
And so it talked about, or one of its components is how to have a working farm. It's an integrated thing. You have the farm, but you also have the land and the livestock and the crops and the watering, and they create this picture of connectedness, of how the farm doesn't exist unless we have all this. And so now we fast forward, you see people talking about homesteads where they say, okay, well, we're going to have a pond that has fish and maybe bees that we can feed the fish and make honey, and then we can irrigate the crops with the water, and we can take the manure from the animals, and so it showed that there's this balance, and they begin to learn and think that way. And then when they put it in a historical perspective, you see the cycles, these things happening over and over again in greater or lesser degree. And you have a great understanding for the connected, integral approach to life that we are never going to get away from, because at the basis of who and what we are, that is it. And if we can begin to teach kids that very early, I think it's going to help to see that there is no separation. There is no isolated event. Everything is affected and attached to everything else.
So the vision becomes a plethora of intentional communities based around unique affinities.
Yes.
Working in collaboration. Because we don't have any welders on in my little group over here, but you guys got a welder, and we've got and it isn't even what you've got and I've got.
Yeah.
It's just that free flow sense of how do we support each other.
Yeah. And they're doing that a little bit now. They have these maker spaces where people can go in, and if they don't have the equipment, they got shared equipment to do wood shop or photo or whatever. And that's beginning to get back. We see back in some of the older times, they had these guilds. They had the blacksmith guilds and and those was a way of beginning to look at kids. Now, some of it, we ain't going to go there, but they tried to look at a kid's skill. Some of it got to be hereditary, and it was bad. But they said, hey, this kid looks like they could be a great hunter or a great artist or a great chef or whatever. And they began to put them in guilds,
right,
so that they could develop that skill and continue to contribute. And now we don't have that. We don't.
We just try to get you into college.
Exactly.
It's the only option anymore. I mean, it's the only publicly acceptable option. Is to put it, and some might argue that some of the trade unions, and there are apprenticeship programs, and there are some trade schools, but again, that's predominantly looked down upon, at least in North America, to take that option. That's the kid. Those were in my high school. Those were the kids that couldn't get by, ended up in the trade schools. They weren't going to have a chance. Now, interesting, trade schools, the trades have kept up very, very well and have turned into a very consistent, solid lifestyle for quite a few people across this country.
And the interesting thing there, and I'm just a little bit before your group, but during my time in high school, it was encouraged if you got your stuff where at your senior year, or you could plan it at your junior year, you could go to school and get the trade. And for myself, my senior year, I took commercial cooking and baking. So in the morning, I would come to school, check in, catch a bus over to the junior college and vocational school. And me and a bunch of buddies went over there, and some took up barbershop and beautician, drafting. I took cooking and baking. Some people took electrician. Yep. And so when we graduated from high school, we had a trade and a high school diploma. So you had all kind of options. You could go into your trade, or you could go to college and further that trade, or you could go to college further and still use your trade to make some money on the side. There were so many options available, and it was taught, i.e., at the school, to say, hey, why don't you check these out? The guidance counselor would say, hey, unless you were on the real academic side, AP classes and stuff, they were looking at giving, how do we give kids more options to be better prepared? Because we know some of them are not going to want to go through the 4-year college deal.
Right. Yeah.
That doesn't happen.
All right, let's get our DeLorean out and get this society back to the future, right? And it's a both and too, because we're not talking about going back to some of the more puritanical belief systems and the racist belief systems and all the other things that were necessary for us to evolve and grow out of. In some ways, it seems like there are these wild divergence that as societies we're taking to learn, hey, we gotta, I'm pretty sure they don't have this problem in Australia. Pretty sure they don't have to have these conversations in Japan. I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of places on the planet where this is not a conversation, where people are absolutely flabbergasted that we continue to let this happen and continue to have to talk about these things.
And to think that we have organizations, and I won't call any names, that advocate and do all this. Oh, that's our amendment right and everything.
It's because we can't afford the lawyers when they sue us. So yeah, please don't say their name, man. No, they got eyes and ears everywhere. I'm not a paranoid person.
It is unbelievable that we're still pushing some of these old and, need I say, barbaric kinds of ideas of what it means to be free and how I exercise or display that freedom.
Yeah.
I'm speechless.
I'm getting this view of we need an ad campaign that really helps people to understand that this proliferation of guns is truly a barbaric form of emotional and physical torture on our youth. And we are allowing it to happen when it's really not necessary. The whole concept, the whole thing is not necessary. But we just keep letting it happen for some twisted sense of freedom that, truthfully, I don't think exists either. If the government wants to come get your guns, folks, you're not going to stop them. I don't care how many you have. They got bigger ones and they got a lot more of them. So, we can stockpile all the weapons we want. If the government wants them, they're going to take them. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have rifles for hunting and other things. But again, I'm going to come back. We got to get some regulation about how these high capacity automatic weapons are getting in the hands of our kids. Who wants to write a law with us? Somebody needs to write us a law.
And the other thing, people always say, oh, there have been wars and rumors of wars forever and ever, and you got to have this, that, and the other. And I read this book once called Ishmael, and it talks about, there've always been disagreement and skirmishes where people had tribes, if you will, had wars or little things again, but they were more to it and fro it. There was an imaginary line and we go back and forth. They were never at the point that we will destroy and annihilate you. Right now, I'm stepping a little off the path of gun control, or teen shooting in high school. But that's where it comes from. That mentality gets passed on, I believe, where it's us against them. And if I help you cease to exist, then I don't have to worry about you, right? Or your kind or your tactics. And that's how some of these kids are beginning to operate, especially if they're experiencing bullying. That thing goes into, we get into heavy suicide, which is a whole nother program issue, or these kids are getting PTSD and they're getting activated to go out and do something irrational because their whole being is stressed.
Right. Yep, exactly. And you spark in me the reminder too that more and more and more and more of our teens are on some sort of medication, or on some whether it's antidepressant, anti-anxiety, of some sort of medication in one way or another. That we have to, it's time to realize. It sounds like I'm starting to sound like a politician, but damn it, we got to invest in our youth.
Yeah, we do. Because they are future leaders, right? Once we start retiring in wholesale amounts and start, collecting whatever we have for retirement, these young people are going to be our leaders. And we don't want them to have a fighting mentality. We just went through a whole administration of this fighting mentality, and we see what that brought about. We need these young leaders to come up looking at how do we have shared experience that are supportive of all, and that we know we can't please everybody, but let's at least take everybody in consideration when we make these decisions and laws and whatever, so that when we do, we can implement them with some kind of compassion and some kind of understanding to go with it.
Yeah. And, folks, a story hit today. I forget the name of the study, but for the first time, the United States of America has been listed as a backsliding democracy. We've been evaluated as a backsliding democracy. So if there's ever any sort of call to action right now to support our kids, I would say it would be that. If we want to see the continuation of this American democracy, we got to support our kids. We got to get guns under control. We got to get this one. And again, we've touched on a lot of things here today, Z, that are necessary. Our invitation to every one of you is, yes, join us in prayer, join us in the consciousness work, and let's all go find a way to get our hands dirty. Let's find a way, whatever it might be, to get to do some of the work there, whatever your heart's calling to you, and let us know about it. Drop us an email, ministertalk@ntmedia.org. Let us know what you're doing. Let us know what you'd like to see us doing. Let us know what you'd like to see the network doing. Let us know what conversations you'd like to have. Let us know what guests you'd like to see us have. Speaking of guests, next week, Reverend Dr. David Alexander is going to be with us. He's a regular contributor on this program. We get him on here 3-4 times a year. And we're going to talk about justice in America and justice on trial next week. We feel Dr. David is an expert voice and a greatly educated voice to speak in relation to the Ahmaud Arbery case, to the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, to all the different various trials that are happening around the country. It's going to be a wide-ranging conversation. We invite you to join us next Tuesday for that as well. Before we go, also, I want to say a quick thank you to all of our financial supporters and those that make this network happen. It is thanks to all of you that we're able to continue bringing forward these type of programming and all of our various spiritual programming throughout the week. New Thought Media Network thanks you for that. If you'd like to be a part of our giving campaign, wrong one, head on over to the website and ntmedia.org, click on the donate button and get started as a monthly contributor. Any amount goes a long way. And it's Giving Tuesday, Z, so double kudos if you hit the button today. Especially Facebook will not double your donation because they've already given away their 8 million long ago today. But please be a part of what we're doing here and reach out. Let us know if there's any questions, anything we can do to support you. Z, before we take off here today, final thoughts.
For me, the final thought is we all should find one organization, one cause on Giving Tuesday that we can give either financially or personally, i.e. my time and energy, preferably both, to begin to work with our young people and begin to work collaboratively to find solutions to the problems that they face so that we can hear it and understand it from where they're seeing it and where they are involved.
Amen. Absolutely. All right, folks, we're going to get out of here. Before we do, though, let's do a proper thank you to our sponsors.
Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, for your continued support. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta for your monthly contribution. Thank you Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey for your monthly contribution. And Suze Ajit, thank you for your very generous donation. And a special thanks to Hefferland Foundation for your generous technology grant. And a big shout out to all our committed donors.
All right, folks, that's all we've got time for today. Join us again next week when our special guest will be Reverend David Dr. Alexander from Atlanta. Until then, peace.
Peace.